I'm climbing these mountains, facing imminent death. And then I'm going back into the clinic telling people, lift with a straight back and be careful that they didn't round it because they might do damage to themselves. And it didn't really sit very well. I was skiing and had an injury, come off a ledge and landed flat on my back. And it was like horrendously painful. And that kind of cascaded into this chronic pain problem. I started holding myself more rigid, being more aware of my posture and keeping it tense, and everything got worse. And the penny dropped one day when someone said to me, "Why are you holding yourself so awkwardly?" Once that penny dropped, I went, whoa, actually I'm not damaged. I'm like, I don't have a broken bone. And I started to relax my body and I started to move naturally, and I could feel I just slowly got better. There is very little evidence that holding good posture and bracing your core and lifting with a straight back has got any benefits for us at all. In fact, it's tiring and it may even be provocative.
Professor Peter O'Sullivan, I thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come on the Pain Coach podcast. It's an absolute honor to have you. As many may know that are listening, and some may not know, you're a world-renowned researcher in low back pain. As you're mentioning, you work clinically 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And what you've done in terms of research has really impacted me personally as a clinician, and the way that I treat people, and also even my business name. So my business name is Physio Pain Coach.
Yeah, I noticed
and
that.
I think that there was an editorial that you were a part of, that you pointed out that we should treat chronic pain like a guide and like a coach, and so that's definitely influenced my practice, even to the point of my business name. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you and be part of this.
And I know,
Lachlan, like I'm part of there are a lot of people involved in the work. It's not just me. So, I'm often the face behind a whole team of people, but there are a lot of amazing people who kind of do a huge amount of work that's behind, the work we do.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. And I knew you would be a little bit embarrassed about me, pumping your ego, but I need to do it. And the reason being is because listeners need to know that, you're not coming at this as just some random guy. You've done a whole bunch of work in this area. And I think, we'll challenge them a little bit today. And so this challenge that they're going to have in terms of some of the ideas and beliefs and the misconceptions that are out there, they need to sort of be aware that there's a lot of research and a lot of backing behind this.
Yeah, 100%. And, that's been part of the privilege of the journey I've walked, I think, is as a clinician, I've had to, and as a person, I've had to change my whole understanding of beliefs around pain, personally from my own experience, but also as a clinician and as a researcher. So I kind of like those three hats had to change across my own personal journey, research journey, and clinical journey.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, we'll hopefully delve into that, but I love someone that can sort of change their mind. I often ask a question, what have you changed your mind on in the last 5 years? And I think it's kind of a red flag if someone says nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're always learning.
100%. And I think that's the beautiful thing about life, is that we have this amazing ability to learn and be sculpted through our own experiences and interactions with people and stuff that we learn. And, as a researcher, fundamentally, my research hat is we test hypotheses. So we might have a belief, and I could give you heaps of examples around this, of we have a belief that this is something how it is. And you look at the evidence, you go, actually, there's not much evidence for that. If we look at it, and then we go, oh, let's do some research on it. And then you go, oh, wow, that is not what I thought. And then you kind of forced to update your belief system and go, how does that fit? And then that forces you to kind of rejig your mindset. And I think that's a lot of the journey that I've walked down. And it's often the journey of the people that I see who live with pain as well, as they come in with a kind of mindset around pain, that stuff they've been told. Or stuff they've learned across their life. And then it's like, whoa, that is not what I thought.
let's go there. I wasn't going to lead with this, but I would love you to just sort of give us a snapshot of the story of how you ended up where you are now.
Yeah, so it's a long journey. So I grew up in New Zealand and went to uni in New Zealand in Dunedin. And so I went, this is many years ago, and very little research around at all for pain. Amazing lack of research. And so, we got taught stuff, but there was really no evidence base behind it. There was kind of like, a lot of beliefs around pain means there's something damaged in your back or pathology or something wrong with the way you move or your posture or this kind of stuff. That was a paradigm that I kind of grew up in. And then as an individual, I was into doing, outdoor nature sports, climbing, rock climbing, kayaking, alpine climbing, actually doing really dangerous things with my spare time, which I loved. And then I was coming back to the clinic telling people to be careful with their back and watch out how they moved. And there was this kind of dissonance in my head of like, hang on a second. I'm climbing these mountains, facing imminent death. And then I'm going back into the clinic telling people to, lift with a straight back and be careful that they didn't round it because they might do damage to themselves. And it didn't really sit very well. And then I had this injury. I was skiing and had a injury where I'd like come off a ledge and landed flat on my back, and it was like horrendously painful. And that kind of cascaded into this chronic pain problem. And I don't think consciously I realized what I'd done, but I'd become really protective of my body. I started abnormally tensing my body. I started holding myself more rigid, being more aware of my posture and keeping it tense, and everything got worse. And I was like, oh my goodness. I remember going home at the end of a day from my clinical work, just exhausted and in pain, and going, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And then I started, restricting my physical activity and stuff. And I was like, whoa, what is happening here? Now, I didn't have a broken back, so I got it scanned. It wasn't broken. So I knew I wasn't damaged as such, but I just got myself into a real difficult situation. And the penny dropped one day when someone said to me, why are you holding yourself so awkwardly? And I'm like, this is a friend of mine. I'm like, oh, that's what? And I realized that I'd kind of gone into all the things that we've been taught at physio school around, keep yourself tense, brace your core, lift with a straight back. I was bending over my patients, keeping myself rigid, and it was exhausting and it hurt. And my pain was spreading, and I could feel myself becoming distressed. And once that penny dropped, I went, whoa, actually, I'm not damaged. I'm like, I don't have a broken bone. And I started to relax my body, and I started to move naturally and started not to protect my body. And I could feel I just slowly got better. Now, that was a really interesting, pivotal insight personally of what I think we see all the time in daily practice, that I'd kind of got myself stuck down this path that I've been taught, that I was teaching people to do, that didn't work for me. Now, that's not saying that holding certain postures or whatever doesn't work for someone else, but for me, it didn't work, and it got me into a real trap. So that kind of led me and the team that I work with down a whole journey of like kind of in research of testing out beliefs around the body. And one of them was around body posture and around movement and lifting. And we've done a lot of work in that space, basically to show that there is very little evidence that holding good posture, bracing your core, and lifting with a straight back has got any benefits for us at all. In fact, it's tiring, and it's probably inefficient, and it may even be provocative and hurting you. And actually, what we're perpetuating a lot of the time is these myths that actually can make people worse and make them think that they've got to overprotect their body, which actually we know is not helpful for them. That's a long answer to a question.
No,
But
that's
there's
a great.
lots of threads that go through it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. How long did the back pain last for you? Like what sort of
Well,
duration was it?
months, like a number of months, probably across a year, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
And, it's interesting. We look at pain that most back pain episodes usually resolve within 3 months, and there's a small
Yeah.
group that go on to develop more persistent pain, which is can be very distressing, disabling, limiting, and I was probably heading into that group. Well, I was heading into that group,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
I really had to teach myself to unlearn
Yeah. Yeah.
something that
And
was
you're
I was subliminally doing. I don't think I was even consciously doing it. It was like I kind of kicked in these protective mechanisms without really knowing what I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're reflecting on a journey of sort of the beliefs that and the misconceptions that are out there widespread. You
Massively.
held on to those beliefs for a period of time, and you even put them into practice
I
when you
did.
had your own
I
issue.
sure did.
Also, from a research perspective, I believe you started off in this
I
sort
did.
of in
I
this
did.
field. Do you mind just talking
Yeah.
about your shift from that style of research to where you are now?
Yeah. So when I first, this is many years ago now. This is like in the mid 90s. Like I've got a brain that I like to know. I like to know things. I hate not knowing something. It drives me crazy. So I'm like, I'm going to do a PhD. So I kind of went down this path of like doing a PhD, and part of that process was in my head, back pain was linked to something structurally wrong in the back, and fundamentally what my belief was back then is if there's something unstable in the back, we need to train the muscles around it to do a better job to support it. That was my mindset, which is a really
Mm.
common belief out there in our communities and perpetuated in gyms and you name it, physiotherapy practices all over the
Yeah.
world. And that was what I was believing. And so part of this research was to kind of look at doing what was commonly known as stabilization training, of like training people to work their core muscles and their back muscles to stabilize their back. But part of this was also looking at the muscles, the way the muscles were working around the back. And we realized that actually the muscles around the back weren't underworking. If anything, they were overworking and they weren't relaxing. So we were like going, hang on a second here. And it's kind of weird looking back now. It was so obvious, right? Because if you think about when you're in pain, like if you have pain in your body, what do? What's your body's response? It's to tense up. It's
Mhm.
not like we go, oh, I'm hurting, I think I'll relax. We don't do that as humans. It's kind of this inbuilt protective mechanism around pain, particularly if it's threatening, is our body tenses up. So if you've got back pain, typically we tense the muscles around the pain, like around the back
Mm.
and across our core. We kind of generate pressure in our core, makes us stiff. So if you look at the research around people with pain and without pain, and anyone who's listening with pain would know this. Like often the report of people with pain is that they move slower and stiffer, they're more guarded, they find it harder to relax their body. That's a really common signature for having pain. And like I've had this numerous times in my life when I'm like, oh, you're sore, and it's like it's really hard to move, and your body stiffens up. That's literally the body's muscle system clenching
Mm.
up. And we kind of
Yeah.
describe it a bit like the clenched fist. If your fist is clenched, it makes your wrist stiff and it creates a lot of compression across those structures. Now, there's nothing wrong with clenching your fist, but you're walking around all day clenching, and you're going to get a sore arm. In the same way, we saw that this was happening around the back, and we were looking at the what we call EMG, which is literally just measuring muscle activity of the muscles around the trunk. And we're like, hang on a second, these people are overworking these muscles. What are we doing training them to do it more? And it was
Yeah.
kind of like this penny drop moment of actually they can't relax them. And then we were listening to the stories of these people going, my back feels stiff, it feels compressed. I'm constantly trying to, crack it or loosen it. I'm looking for massage or heat or stretches to get relief, and it just keeps coming back. And I was like, whoa, what are we doing here? And it was
Yeah.
kind of like this moment of realization that these people are already over guarded and over tense. A lot of these people were over tense already, and all we were doing is creating more tension. Now, it's good to be strong, right? But it's not normal to be tense when you don't need to be. And we often use the analogy of writer's cramp. Like if you're writing and you clench the pen, you can't write for long because you just get too much pain in your body. And that idea of over contracting muscles is not efficient and actually can be painful. It's a really common thing we see with pain in the body. Now, particularly around the neck and the back and the upper back, like the trunk is a really common pattern because you can't unload it easily and the body's
Mm,
response is to guard it. So that was
mm.
kind of like a light bulb moment for me, kind of realizing from our research and then kind of reflecting back on the stories and watching how people moved, going, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's obviously like there's a belief under the belief. The belief under the belief is that the spine is fragile and that
Yeah,
it needs
yeah,
this
protection.
protection. And if could you touch on why this belief of fragility is
Yeah.
is not helpful based around some of the science around pain that we now know?
Yeah, yeah, sure. It's a really common view. We know that that view emerges really early in life. So we've done studies looking at young people around 13 to 16, as well as people in their 50s. And it's a really common view that, backs are fragile and need protecting. And I think that's partly emerged because uh, back pain is so common. It's really debilitating and it's often triggered by very minor things. And so, it's like you hear stories like I went to pick up a pen and my back seized up, or I went to get out of bed, or I just twisted to reach across and my back seized up. And so you can see and I used to believe this as well, you can see why you would think, wow, to do something that small can cause so much pain. That means that the back must be super fragile, that it could be so easily triggered. So it
Yeah.
kind of makes sense that that's a common view, I reckon. Now, what we know though is that it's actually really hard to damage a back. So I've broken some bones in my back, and that was through mountain biking and flipping over my bars and landing across a log. Massive force that went crack. That's you can break your back, and we know that from traumatic injuries. You can have other pathologies like disc prolapse. I think you mentioned you might have had one. I've had one. That's where there is some kind of force within the body that exceeds the structural strength of the system, and it can result in some kind of pathological process. But the majority of people, that means like 95% of people have back pain. There's nothing identifiable when you scan them that kind of that's predictive of their pain experience. And we often describe this as a headache. I think as people we understand that you can get a terrible headache, like a 10 out of 10 headache or a migraine with no head injury and no damage to the head and no pathology, because
Yeah.
you're tired and you're stressed and you're run down and you might be tense and stuff's happening in your life. Your health's not good and you maybe not be exercising. I don't think we understand that in the back, but it's we know from the evidence we see a very similar kind of phenomena when our susceptibility to back pain is often when other stuff's happening in our life that leaves us vulnerable to mechanical loading. And that's more about the sensitivity of the structures of the
Yeah.
body, not about the structural vulnerability of the structures. And that's a really important point to differentiate
Yeah.
between the tissue's super sensitive, but it's not damaged. And that's really hard, I think, for people to understand. It's hard for clinicians to understand, but it's a truth.
Yeah, it is super tricky, and obviously you would have experienced some pushback to that. And I'm
Absolutely,
just
yeah.
thinking about the listeners, and there'll be someone out there going, I don't get it, what's going on here, because they've always connected pain to damaged structures. And I guess as we grow up, we kind of learn it that way because
Yeah, we
we do
do.
fall over, scrape our knee, and pain
Yeah,
is around. And so
yeah.
pain sometimes can mean damage, but what
You
you're
bet it
saying
can.
is not
I've had both.
always.
I've had
Yeah,
both pains. I've had a number of injuries in my life that have caused tissue damage, and they were excruciating pain. But I've also had pain in my life when there's no tissue damage that's caused
Yeah.
similar excruciating pain. And
Hmm.
for me as a clinician, that's super helpful, because our job as clinicians is to help differentiate the two. Because the last thing we want to do with someone where there is pain linked to tissue damage is to tell them that there isn't any, because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not true. And like, we know with like, you can have a broken leg. It's not, you want to offload that leg to let it heal. So if you've got tissue damage, there's a period where the natural healing needs to take place. But that's why the history is taking so important, because we know
Yeah.
about a third of people with back pain can't even report a trigger for it. Like, there's no mechanical trigger. And usually it's stuff around high levels of stress, other stuff happening in their life. And usually there's a mixed bag that goes with it. Invariably, if people are listening and they reflect back on when they've had a pain flare up, I'd say to them, how were you sleeping? What was happening in your life? What were your stress levels? How was your mood? Were you engaged in physical activity? How was your general health? And when you kind of look at those factors, often they'll go, you know what? I was under a heap of pressure at that time. I
Yeah.
was pretty tense, and that's when I did something, and then I got the flare up. And
Yeah.
and it makes sense when you see pain through that lens,
Yeah.
that it could be linked to tissue damage, but it's often linked, often, not always, to other factors that we know can sensitize your system, make your system
Mm.
more sensitive.
Yeah. Yeah. Why are beliefs so important to you? Because I think that's a major contribution of you is trying to dispel some of these myths
Yeah,
and also replace them with more positive
yeah,
beliefs. Why is belief so important when it comes to
yeah.
pain?
Yeah, so we know that beliefs will influence. So, if you have a belief, for example, let's say we take the example of someone who is told, I'll give you an example of a chap I saw who's a firefighter, and he'd been told that he had a back of a 60-year-old, right? He's
Mm,
32, and
mm,
he needs his back for his job, right? So when I said to him, so what did that information mean to you? He said, that means I'm old before my time. That means I'm fragile. That means I need to start protecting my back more. That means I need to stop doing stuff like physical activity
mm,
or things that load my back to preserve my time, because I need to keep working. That's scary as well. That information's scary and it makes me worried. So a belief can influence our emotional responses to whatever it is, if particularly it's in the body and it's a threatening belief. But it also influences our behavior. So we know this, for example, that if someone holds a belief about the pain, it means there's a sign of damage, that it may not get better, that I need to protect my back, they're more likely to take time off work, avoid physical activity, protect their body more. It affects their confidence, it make them more frightened. So we know those are potent drivers of pain persistence, for example. Now, if you had a belief, an alternate belief, so let's say I said to this guy, which I did, look, mate, those findings on your scan are normal in someone of your age. We know that at the age of 30, about 60% or 70% of people will have a so-called degenerate disc, and 60% have disc bulges, and 30% have protrusions. That is completely normal. And we know that even if you have those findings, it's safe for you to move and to use your body and to load it in a normal way. And I can help coach you to do it. Now, that was a pathway to that guy's recovery. So the first message he said, impacted both his physical and mental health. And we know this from the research, that if you tell someone that damage, not all, but a lot of people, it starts affecting their confidence, starts making them fearful, it starts making them avoid stuff because they want to, and it makes sense. You will protect your body. So the beliefs are so important around giving honest, accurate information to people, but that's not enough, because you've then got to give them a pathway and that's the coaching bit, because often it's not enough to just say, hey, these things are happening, and it's like, well, I need some help to kind of take
Yeah.
a journey to get back to the stuff that I value.
Yeah. So you're obviously outlining that the beliefs change some of the like psychological aspects, also
Yeah,
some of the
and people,
functional
you
aspects.
bet.
But what about pain itself? How do the beliefs that we have influence our pain?
Yeah, so there's a really interesting study done a while back where they got this like kind of, it's called a thermode. It's like a hot, or like a very it's like a hot electrode. Put it on someone's skin, and they had two groups. In one group, they were like, "Look, this is really, really painful, and it's like it could give you a bit of a burn," and they kind of ramped it up, made people a bit frightened. In the other group, so like it's not a big deal, it's a bit warm, but there's no harm to you whatsoever. They looked at the difference between those two groups, and the group that was much more stressed around it showed a much bigger inflammatory response to exactly the same input. Now, what that tells us is that our beliefs in itself wouldn't do it, but if you start making someone worried or stressed or frightened, so those emotions are potent drivers of our biology, essentially. That
Yeah.
can change the sensitivity of our body, and can change our chemistry. Now,
Mhm.
we also know this from other research that when we look at people recover, often it's linked to people developing a more positive belief system around their body, becoming less fearful, becoming less protective,
Mm.
and developing healthy lifestyle behaviors
Mm.
actually facilitates recovery. That means they have less pain and activity limitation. So there is a close relationship between how much pain we feel in our body and how much we protect our body, uh, related to our thoughts. Amazingly,
Yep.
so our thoughts influence our biology, and I think a lot of people misunderstand this by going, "Are you telling me it's in my head?" I always say to them, "No way! Like no
Mm.
way! Your thoughts and emotions will drive your biology." And let's give you an example of it. Like,
Yep.
you can feel like if someone tells you something that's quite stressful, you feel your heart race, you can feel your
Mm.
breathing change, you can feel your body tense up. Every human being knows what that feels like. That's a thought. Someone just told you
Mm.
something that then triggers, but the emotions are the potent part of it. If it trigger the thought is just a thought. If it triggers an
Yep.
emotion, and that emotion might be stressful or threatening, what does that affect? Your gut, your heart, your tension in your muscles, your level of alertness. It changes your biology.
Yeah, I think that's huge the way you put it there, because that is the common pushback to some of the pain science
Yeah,
education around your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions and how they influence pain. But it influences it on a biological
yeah,
level, and
hundred
we
percent.
even see that in the placebo studies as well. There are literally more endogenous
You bet.
opioids that are inherent within us
Yeah,
floating around that are producing some of these pain relieving responses with a pill that's not doesn't have the active ingredient. So
yeah,
that's awesome. I want to touch on, so you did you have a editorial based on some of the research that you've done, back to basics, 10 facts every person should know about pain.
yeah,
And you list a bunch of myths. What are the most common myths that you hear clinically?
yeah. Can I tell you where that came from? So that we were involved in the Restore trial, which was this big clinical trial that we were involved in. Part of the training of the clinicians involved them working with about 80 people who had really disabling and distressing back pain. And part of that journey was to ask them, so what do you think's going on? Look, we do that anyway as clinicians, because
Mm.
they're like, we want to know what you're thinking, to go, what do you think's going on? And we heard these recurrent themes come up all the time. And often people held a number of different beliefs. And then we asked them, where did you get that from? And almost invariably, it came from other healthcare practitioners. Now, that
Yep.
really concerned me because it made me realize that actually within healthcare, we are perpetuating and promoting untruths about the
Mm.
back. So the
Mm.
kinds of things that often come up are, back pain means there's some serious medical condition going on. Well, we know that's about for 1%. That's not for the majority. Like back pain means, there's something damaged in your back and you need a scan. Well, we know scanning is really important in certain conditions. If you have a fracture, a trauma, infection, a history of malignancy, nerve compression, can't pee, that kind of stuff. Really important, like really important. But
Mm.
again, 95% of people don't fit in that category. And the
Yep.
other problem we've got is that we kind of often within our health system, we get scanned thinking that that's the cause of your pain. When we know that the majority of people with no pain have stuff on a scan, but it's scary language. So we use languages
Mm.
and scans like degeneration and fissures and arthritis and stuff that really worry people. We saw a lot of people worried about their scans. And these are scans that are normal, actually, age-related changes that
Mm.
anyone with no pain would have, but we're frightening people by telling them it. So that was another belief. There's another one around pain flare-ups. It's like, oh my God, I keep injuring my back. Well, we know that your susceptibility to a pain flare-up is really common in back pain, and it can be
Yep.
really debilitating and really painful. The common triggers of it are if you're down, if you're under more stress, if you're less active, if you're not sleeping well, not if you're injured. And so that's a massive misconception because it makes
Mm.
you think, oh, I better protect my back. God, I've got to, like you treat it like an injury, and actually it shouldn't be. There are lots of beliefs around the body itself, like the belief around if I engage in physical activity. So if I'm doing a physical activity or a movement and it hurts, it means I should avoid it. Well, we know that when your back is really sensitive, lots of things hurt. But actually, as you relax and re-engage with those movements, they hurt less. If your response to pain is thinking, oh gee, I'm doing that, it hurts, I won't do it, it gets us into a pattern of overprotection and avoidance, which actually makes the condition worse. So that's another
Mm.
really common belief that's perpetuated in
Mm.
health. There's
Yeah.
another belief around the body, around posture. It means, and I hear this all the time, people go, oh, I've got a really bad posture, my posture's really bad, and I've got a weak core. A really common
Mm.
belief. Now, we know sitting up straight, it's not dangerous, but it's pretty tense and it won't
Yeah.
protect you from back pain. So we know that at a population level. We also know this idea of lifting with a straight back. There's actually no evidence that it protects you from back pain. So, and it's
Mm.
less efficient. So, actually, relaxing and moving in a more natural way is what people without back pain do. And as people with back pain get better, they tend to do that more.
Mm.
So it's a massive misconception, and we sell that through pretty much any manual handling training of like,
Yeah.
you've got to keep your back straight, you've got to brace your core, and be careful not to bend your back or lift with a steep
Yeah.
lift. Well, there's just no evidence for it. The
Yeah.
core thing, the core one's really interesting as well, right? Because I used to be part of that as well. This idea that somehow when you brace your core, you take load off your back, that is absolute not true. So when you brace your core, you tense your back. Now, that's appropriate if you're lifting something really heavy, if you're doing a plank, if you're pushing something hard, of course you engage your core. But we see people with pain doing it, bending over, picking up something off the ground, rolling out of bed, getting off a chair. Over contracting your core makes you super stiff and very tense, and it can cause more pain. So that's
Mm.
another misconception. And then I think, if I haven't got them in front of me, but I'm running
Mhm.
through them. There's a
Yeah.
really strong view in our community that if your pain's not getting better, that means, like, there's this view that you will just get worse with time. Well, we know that is absolutely not true. We know
Mhm.
that even if you've had pain, I see this in my practice, pain for 30 years, you still have the capacity for managing it effectively. And we have this view that it will just get worse with time. Well, we know that's not true, but it's a really common worry for people. And probably the final one is around, I need stronger medication, or I need surgery, or I need more invasive treatment. And sadly, we see lots of examples of people with really heavy medication that just doesn't work. And no better example of that than the opioid epidemic, which has actually had a really devastating effect on people and communities all around the world. The body actually starts accommodating to the medication after a period of time. It inhibits your body's natural opioid system in a lot of people, and it can actually, lead to all kinds of other health problems. In terms of surgery, there are indications for surgery. Like if you've got a nerve that's compressed, that's limiting your ability to pee, or it's affecting your power in a muscle, or those are or you've got an unstable fracture or something like that. Absolutely an indication for surgery. But for a lot of people, surgery for back pain, which might be a disc replacement or a fusion, the evidence for it, looking at long-term outcomes, is just not what people hope for. Around 30% are not doing well it's up to 40% in some cases, not doing well at all. There are complications with it, and the outcomes are no better than if you don't have surgery. So the fix isn't a fix in a lot of cases. And that's really hard for people if they've tried everything and then this is the last resort. It's hard because people in pain are wanting to get out of pain. It's totally normal. I would be the same. But we have to be honest with people to go, actually, at the moment, this is what we understand to be true. And for a lot of patients, it's like, whoa, what are you telling me? Like, this is just common belief, isn't it? But we realize that when we look at the evidence, it's not supported by evidence.
Yeah, I see it all the time. The despair and helplessness that happens when the last resort doesn't help. Which is surgery for a lot of people. That's their sort of like, okay, now I must just get this because it's not working, or it's not recovering, and it's a disaster sometimes. It's really sad.
It is. And look, I had a man I saw just a fortnight ago who'd had 30 years or probably 40 years of back pain. And he'd had multiple treatments and interventions, and ended up having his whole lower back fused, and his pain was worse, not better. And of like, what are my options? And he'd kind of resigned himself to the fact that that was just his lot. And that's so sad for me as a human, let alone as a care practitioner, let alone as a researcher, to go, we got to stop doing that stuff when it's not indicated.
Totally, 100%. I think the most common that I hear are the posture and the core. So I want to delve a little bit deeper on that. Where did this myth come from that we must pick up things with a straight back?
Yeah. So there are two different things here, I reckon. One is, if you look at kind of historically, look at, the, Victorian era in the United Kingdom. What were women doing? They were wearing corsets, right? They were wearing corsets, and they were given education about how to hold their bodies. Now, I've got a daughter, and I've watched her with interest go through her, dance and ballet and all this stuff, and all the attention. Pull your belly in, keep your shoulders back. We tell people really early on in life to hold their bodies in certain ways, and women get it more than men. And we've seen that with population research, looking at 13-year-olds, body posture, how you sit and how you stand is probably best predicted by your sex. If you're female, you tend to sit more upright. If you're male, you're more slouchy. Who gets those messages? So there is kind of like what we would say is social desirability. We have this view of, oh, that's nice posture. We hear it all the time. Oh, that's nice posture. Like, it looks socially desirable. You don't have to look far on social media to see what desirable posture looks like. Desirable bodies look like. They look like a flat core, straight back. That looks desirable. You see someone with a, relaxed core, slouchy posture. People don't like it. It's not socially desirable. So I think there's a cultural component around body posture that is long-standing, that we have kind of connected with back pain, because we're like, oh, you got to stand with a neutral spine. We hear it all the time. I was taught it. Literally, my first day in physio school in Otago was stripped to my undies, and I had a posture photo taken, and someone criticized it for not being good posture. That was literally day one. And I was this young boy. I hadn't even thought about my posture up until that time in my life. And now I just had someone dismantling me. So it's so
You were
embedded.
humiliated.
Oh, 100%. It was terrible. They'd never be allowed to do it now. It was like New Zealand back in the dark ages. But that view is still around. I mean, you don't have to look far around, this, I'm not against Pilates, but my goodness, this idea you got to, brace your core to keep your back good. It's just not true. Being strong, great. Being active, great. Like, moving, great. But this idea that sitting upright and bracing yourself is good for you. So that's around the core and body position. And then that got kind of hooked into the lifting space. Probably not so much for looking good, but there was an really early study by a surgeon called Alf Nackimson back in I think it was the 60s, it might even before that, where they had people with no pain, and they stuck these little pressure sensors in their back. And they looked at where the pressure was the most, what postures cause more pressure. And they found that if you bend forward, if you're upright, there's less pressure. You bend forward, there's more pressure. And then they kind of extrapolated that to say, oh, right, so bending forward puts more pressure on your back. That must be a cause of back pain. There was never a link between the two. It just evolved. And then this whole thing came out around lift with a straight back. And that has perpetuated. Now, there are some other studies that have been done, like with pig spines, where they literally get a pig or knock it off, and they take its spine and they stick it in a vice, and they repetitively bend the pig spine until it breaks. And then they go, oh, repeated bending can break your back. Like, that's like 20,000 bends on a dead pig's back, right? That was never designed to be upright. And then it's extrapolated. That means if you do lots of repeated bending, you can break your back. It's like, oh my Lord. So
it's like your back has a lifetime amount of bends in it, and then your cactus
is stuffed. And so that makes people think, oh, gee, I better be careful not to do too many bends because I've only got a lifetime of X. Now, that's so unhelpful, because what we know about the human spine, it's organic. So actually we get stronger with repeated load. We get stronger as we move and load our backs. And that's the other myth around loading. Loading makes your back stronger. And yet we often tell people not to load their backs. And so there have been a number of studies that we've been involved in around lifting. Nick Saraceni did a study called To Flex or Not to Flex, and that was to look at the evidence around whether rounding your back is a risk factor for back pain or for future back pain. There is not a single study out there that supports that view, but that's all through the ergonomic and manual handling industry. There's not a single study to support it. That's amazing if you think about it. There was a study in New Zealand that looked at, in fact, there was another, what's called a systematic review, which looks at all the evidence in the literature, and it looked at how people with back pain lift versus how people without back pain lift. And it fundamentally showed that people with back pain tend to lift with a straight back. People without back pain don't, right? So one of my PhD students, Ivan Hours, just published a couple of papers showing that as people with chronic back pain get better, when there's a relationship between their movement and their pain, they actually start going from a squat lift towards a semi-squat or stoop lift. So actually, and that's been followed up with other research showing that actually protecting your back less hurts less, ironically. Just so
Yeah.
counterintuitive.
So we should definitely lift with a stoop posture if we're in pain, would you say?
No, what we would say is that don't be governed by rules. I
Mm,
think rules are really unhelpful if they're not founded. You know, in terms of rules, like, we would say, how did you used to lift before you had back pain? And often people go,
yeah.
oh, I just bent over. I'm like, let's try that because it didn't sound like that was a problem for you before. Let's check that out. And a great example of this was, and again, Nick Saraceni did this, one of his PhD studies, looked at people who'd been lifting in manual work for 10 years, like people who'd
Mm,
survived the industry, hadn't had back pain. They were tending to just bend over. They were not lifting with a straight back. So they're doing something that's allowed them to survive that industry. The other study, which is super interesting, is comparing lifting with like a straight back versus a round back. Round back lifting is actually more efficient. You can generate more force
mm,
for less effort. So if you're in a gym, you're doing 10 lifts, it doesn't matter how you lift, right? But if you're a manual worker trying to lift with a straight back, that could be really fatiguing because it's not efficient. And often you talk to
mm,
manual workers, they'll absolutely tell you that's the case. So
yeah.
lots of research is kind of heading down the path of, like, we don't say there's one way to lift. We would say you need to be fit and strong and efficient
Mm,
to lift in a variety of ways because that shows you've got a back that can adapt to a variety of conditions.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's awesome research. It's really, really cool to see. And that's evolving and still happening,
Yeah,
and
it is, yeah.
we'll be better off in 5 to 10 years than we are now in terms of our knowledge
Yeah.
around this. But
What you go.
sorry, I want to delve into the your restore trial.
Yeah.
Can you tell us just what happened in that trial, and
So
what sort of implications it has for people with
yeah.
back pain?
Yeah. So the Restore trial was probably at this is so cognitive functional therapy is kind of an approach that our team's been involved in developing, and it's really an integration of a whole lot of things. But fundamentally, there are three components to it. One, the first is just helping people to understand what's going on. So it's not about lecturing them. It's not about telling them it's in their head. It's about saying, "Hey, tell me your story. Let's listen to your story and let's examine you and let's sit down and try and help make sense of your experience in your life." But it's almost like put the pieces together so it makes sense for you. That's the making sense bit. The second
Yeah.
bit is building confidence. So we know that people with back pain, when pain is really disabling or limiting, lose confidence in their body. And so
Hmm.
that part is really about just building confidence back in the body to re-engage in normal activities and movement without protecting your back, keeping it, getting it strong, getting it active, but coaching them through that journey back to
Hmm.
things in life they love. So it's entirely person centered. So it might be,
Hmm.
a person says, I can't sit for a period of time. So we would coach you to learn to sit in a more comfortable, relaxed position so you can do it. It might be, I can't play with my kids. So we'd work out what it was about playing with your kids that you were struggling with, and we coach you back to do it. It might be, I can't,
Mm.
like Joe, I can't do my job as a firefighter. So we're going to go, right, what are the things what are the barriers for you working as a firefighter? So that's a longer journey because you need to be really fit and strong and lift heavy loads. And, like that's that you have to get super strong and fit for that.
Mm.
It might be, I can't go for a walk or ride my bike or go to work or whatever it is. It's like, so it's very person centered around, okay, let's create a program that's specific to you and your needs and your personal, the way your body has responded to pain, and build your confidence back to do that stuff. And then the third pillar is around lifestyle factors. So, and it's again individual. So we would say physical activity is really important for human beings. And the best activity is the one that you like and you keep doing forever. So we don't say, you got to do Pilates, you got to do swimming, you got to do this. We'd say, hey, what do you enjoy? And it's like, we dance, it's great. Could be Tai Chi, yoga, I don't care what it is. As long as you're doing it, we will coach you back to do it. Then addressing other things around sleep. We know sleep's super important. Stress coping is another really important thing. It might be relaxation techniques, as well as advice around healthy diet, which we know is really important as well. So that's the lifestyle bit. So that is a model of care is really aligned to what the evidence tells us is good care for back pain, but it hadn't really been tested in a big trial. So what we did, it was a 2-center trial. There was a group in Sydney and a group in Perth. We trained up 18 clinicians, physios, to deliver this kind of care. And that was kind of hard for them because I think a lot of physios are used to, lie down and we'll do something to you. This was quite a shift in terms of your role being as a coach rather than try and fix the person, if that makes sense. But a lot of these people had already kind of given up on those fixes anyway. They hadn't worked for them. So it wasn't a big shift, I think, for the patient. I've had tried that, it didn't work. So we compared what we call CFT, cognitive functional therapy, to usual care. That means you were randomized at one of those two groups. There were about 500 people in the trial. We were really inclusive. The only people we excluded were things like, fractures, pathology, cancers, infections, compressed nerves and stuff. Everyone else went in. You could have had failed back surgery, you name it. And we didn't have an age limit. And we kept people up into their 80s because a lot of clinical trials just don't include older people, which is crazy. So we included all those people. And then we followed them up. So there was a 3-month intervention period where the people were seen about 8 times at that time frame. And then we followed them up 6 months later, one off, just to check in with them and what we will call a booster session to kind of check in, make sure they're on track, doing well, answer any questions, off they go. So what do we find? We found that people who went through that approach compared to usual care had less pain, they were less disabled, they were less fearful, they were more confident, and they had more positive beliefs about the body. And they told us that. They told us that actually building trust, having someone to coach them that they trusted was really important for them building confidence back in the body, being showed they could do things. Having those misconceptions kind of help understanding those misconceptions and developing a new confidence in the body was really important for them. Interestingly, just like next week, we expect to be released the 3-year follow-up data as well. That shows that those effects, so those are treatment effects that we saw at 12 months, look like we know they have lasted out to 3 years. So that means something fundamentally has changed for these people. And when we've asked
phenomenal.
them, it's really exciting because it gives, and a lot of these people had literally given up on treatment. They're kind of just in our communities just going, well, this is my lot. They kind of accepted it, which is so sad, I think. So the other thing that we found is that it actually saved a lot of money. So there was an economic analysis to kind of go, does the economics of this stack up? If you train up clinicians and you spend this time with patients, does it actually, economically for patients and for the health systems, does that stack up? And it showed that there was a cost saving of over $5,000 per person in the CFT arm. And that was because people were getting back to stuff. They were getting back to work. They're getting back to stuff that's, like work at home and employment. So actually there's an economic and a clinical benefit for this model of care.
The amazing thing about that study for me was not just because it's a 12-week program with the booster, like you said, and oftentimes what we see in back pain studies is, while the treatment is going on, there is an effect, and then it just sort of reverts back to baseline. And the fact that, ongoing, and you've done a year out, it sounds like you're continuing that on to hopefully get some data around 3 years. It seems the effect size is maintained, which is phenomenal. What do you think?
That is the key, I reckon, Lachlan, of this trial that surprised people. And the reason there's almost no 3-year follow-up trials is because there's very few trials that show a difference at a year. So there's no point following someone up for 3 years. The fact we got a difference in a year was why we followed people up for 3, because we're like, wow,
makes sense.
Actually they improved more at 12 months than at 6 months. So it wasn't
Yeah,
just they
wow.
maintained it, but they actually gained over that time.
Mhm. Yeah, that's crazy. I heard Lorimer speak about this and his trial, the Resolve trial, and he believes that the reason for the effect was around this changing our beliefs around what's actually going on. Would you agree with that? What do you think was the mediator to the effect that the
Well,
people in the
we know
CFT
this.
group had?
We actually know it because there's a paper that's under review at the moment that's looked at this. So when we looked at what underpinned the effect for someone having less disability, which is what is our primary outcome measure,
Hmm.
a reduction in pain was one thing. So they had less pain, which kind of makes sense. If you're in lots of pain, it's really hard to engage in stuff. But actually, they had
Mm.
less pain, so it was easier for them to engage in stuff.
Hmm.
Less, the word's not nice. Like there's this term called pain catastrophizing, which is not a nice thing, but it's actually just a reflection of your belief. So if you're believing that, this is this will never get better.
Hmm.
I never be able to go back to work. There's nothing I can do about it. Those kinds of beliefs and
Hmm.
thoughts were another thing. Confidence was the other one. So when people were more confident, they're more likely to engage in stuff and
Hmm.
then less frightened. So actually it's not a single thing. It's a change in what we call whole system change, a change
Hmm.
in your beliefs, a less fear, more confidence. And the other thing that's super interesting is we were able to track how people moved.
Mhm.
Because we had these movement sensors on people, we were looked at the things like forward bending or lifting, for example, and we found that as people got better, they started moving faster and often further. That makes
Mhm.
so much sense. Like if you think of anything in your life, if you're not confident to ride a bike, how do you ride a bike? You ride slower and you're stiffer. If you're
Yeah.
not confident to, you know, ski or walk on a narrow bridge or whatever, you're slower,
Mhm.
you're more guarded.
Yeah.
And we
Mhm.
saw this, that there's this body thing that goes on that as
Mhm.
people get better, their bodies frees up essentially. They're like
Yeah.
freer to move, they're more confident to move, they're not thinking so much about it. And so
Yeah.
it's not just these thoughts, it's actually a body response as well. And that's so important because I think often we hear this and go, oh, if I just believe differently, I'm going to get better. We know that's not enough.
Mm.
It's a much more
Mhm.
complex process than that around confidence building to do the things that you might have avoided or are scary or in pain to be
Yeah.
coached through that journey. And that's the doing bit. It's not about being told something, it's about experiential learning
Mhm.
through a supported journey.
There's no surprises there that there was multiple things that contributed to
100%.
the effect because
Yeah.
pain, of course, is multifactorial.
It is.
I want to go back to the lifestyle stuff. For those that have listen along and follow my journey, they know how passionate I am about lifestyle interventions for pain.
Yeah.
I've actually, Pete, you might not know this, but I've released an app that I
I
use
just
with my
found out
clients.
yesterday, actually.
Yeah, cool. Pain Coach helps clinicians take the guesswork out of pain relief by tracking pain alongside key lifestyle factors, psychological distress, sleep, nutrition, exercise, and social connection. Pain Coach analyzes this patient data to uncover lifestyle scores, relationships, and trends, helping clinicians guide their patients towards the habits most likely to bring pain relief. Love to hear your thoughts on lifestyle and pain.
Yeah. Look, I think, I think what you touched on is correct. We know that everybody the factors that drive pain are different for different people. I can tell you examples of people who are literally going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and getting 4 or 5 hours sleep at night. That's just
Mm,
a disaster for pain. Like we know that's a driver of pain. We know there are other
mhm,
people who have insomnia, um,
mhm,
and and that's a sleep problem.
mm,
Other people, pain itself keeps waking them up all night every time they move. So there are lots of reasons why sleep might become disrupted. But we know sleep's really important for some people, not for all. For some
Mm-hmm.
people, they sleep fine. They just can't function through the day. So
Yeah.
so then sleep becomes an issue, and we would go, what is it about your sleep that we can help you target to get you sleeping better?
Mm-hmm.
Physical activity, we just know is so protective. But there are lots of people where they can't do physical activity because it hurts them so much that they've
Yep.
stopped. And so part of what
Mm-hmm.
we do would be to coach them with strategies to get back to it. And then the maintaining it, we would say, is really important. So it's, for whole health, and forget about the back. It's important for your mental health, physical health, every aspect
Mm-hmm.
of your health. It is like brushing your teeth. It's just something every human being should be doing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like an absolute that we really, really try and
Mm-hmm.
coach people towards. But often it's overcoming the barriers that we would take them through, and then it's kind of getting them to try and maintain those healthy habits over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
The stress things are the other one that's, I think, really, really important. We see this more and more in the pain literature, and we certainly hear
Mm-hmm.
it with people. And we would try and give people stress strategies to manage their stress. That might be effective breathing techniques. It might be engaging socially. It might be because often when we're stressed, we do all the things that actually reinforce our stress. Doesn't often not make it
Yeah.
better. We might drink more. We might sleep less. We might be on our phone more. We might socially isolate ourselves. And it's like a dopamine hit that gives us
Mm-hmm.
short-term relief, but on the long run, it can actually be detrimental. And so
Yeah.
again, that would be a coaching process of like trying to help them through that. And then, of course, we've got some really interesting emerging research, not us. There is emerging
Mm.
research around, the whole microbiome, which is your gut health,
Yep.
that seems to be really impacted by things like stress, as well as, like ultra processed foods and stuff like that. Now, that's quite an early emergent area in terms of, say, back pain, for example, that we
Yeah.
research. But we do see certainly evidence around, things like someone's metabolic health and their other
Mm-hmm.
health issues. So those
Yep.
things again are important, but they're really hard things to change. If you're, a single mom, you got 3 kids, and you're short on time, and you're working a job, and you haven't got time to go to the shop and buy fresh food, or maybe you can't even afford it. It is
Yep.
so hard to
Mm-hmm.
make those kinds of changes. So,
Yeah.
we come to our clinical encounters with a lot of empathy and
Yeah.
not judgment, because I think living with pain is really tough. I've had my own
Mm-hmm.
pain journey, and I know
Mm-hmm.
how incredibly exhausting it is,
Yeah.
um, to live with it.
100%.
And
Yeah.
so I think one of the things that we really come with is to go, hey, how can I support your journey,
Yeah.
rather than coming to someone and saying, hey, you need to sort all this stuff out in your life, and they're
Yeah.
like, come and sit in my shoes for a week and
Yeah.
see how that feels. I've got
Exactly.
a child who's sick, or a parent with Alzheimer's, or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
People carry a lot of load in our communities
Mm-hmm.
that has big impact on them, and it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the reason that I developed the app was for my own clinical work and also my own personal pain, and trying to work out, well, how can I help that? And you're so spot on in that what we're trying to do is for people to change habits, and we know habit change is so
Really,
hard. And sometimes I feel like we just chuck the kitchen sink at them and say, hey, do all of this. And so the app, sort of like, the goal of it is to sort of reverse engineer that and go, okay, well, what are the things that seem to be related, have this relationship to your personal pain? And what
yeah,
comes to the top is the most important. Let's just focus there, because if we just chuck everything at you, good
yeah,
luck. It's tough to change
overwhelming.
one habit, never alone five at the same time. So that's kind of
Agreed.
the goal. It's not perfect, but I think it's a little bit better than what we do clinically, where we sort of just kind of guess, and we kind of have to get them to relay a month's worth of
Yeah.
information in a session, and it's pretty hard. So
Yeah, it is. And look,
yeah.
I think, wearables are interesting because that's where a lot of research is going at the moment. And
Hmm.
some people, they really value them, and others hate them. So, it's really interesting around, like, some
Yeah.
people love diaries, some people hate diaries, some people
Yeah.
love activity monitors, others like hate them. So there's a kind of personal preference that comes in here
Yeah.
around, what can we do that works for you to support your journey? And I presume that's sort of where you're placing that. But, I can think
Yeah,
of
for sure.
people who I've gone, you know what, let's just get you to monitor these things over a period of a week or two, and let's see what it's telling us about your pain.
Hmm.
And that sounds pretty much what your app does. So
Hmm.
it'd be interesting to collect some data on that to go,
Mm.
you know, what are the patterns that you're seeing, and does that help someone nudge a behavior
Yeah.
change process? So, my research
Yeah.
brain ticks on at that point and go,
Oh,
oh, that's interesting. That'd be cool to
eh,
kind of explore.
for sure. Well, if you wanna take it up, Pete, I'll be more than happy to. I actually spoke to I don't know if you know Joshua Pate, but he got me
Yeah, sure.
connected to. And for those that aren't
Yeah,
aware, he's a pain researcher, particularly
yeah,
in pediatric pain, so for
yeah,
children. He got me in contact with Mark Overton, that's actually done research around these lifestyle things with NEOA. So,
yeah,
and it's
right.
interesting. His research is very much aligned with
Yeah, right.
unaware. We sort of came at this from a different angle, but
Yeah,
I've been
right.
in contact with him, and he's also thinking, oh, maybe we could do something together here and see what the data looks
Yeah,
like. So I
love
would
to chat.
love that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. I have a bit of a tradition on the show where I ask you to speak to someone that's feeling helpless, feeling
Yeah,
a lot of despair because of their pain. And in this case, let's just talk about low back pain. Can
yeah,
you speak to them? What should they
yeah,
do? And is there hope for them?
yeah. So, look, I that that's a group of people I see every week in my work, and I see people who carry a huge burden, pain and distress, and kind of hopelessness or failed hope. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that that's been
Mm,
your experience, because it's like a hidden burden that people carry.
mhm.
You can't see it. If you had a broken leg and you had it sticks, it'd be so much easier. It's like you could see it. It's measurable, and it's so hard, I think, to live with something that is not so measurable. That doesn't mean it's not exact. It's real. It's absolutely real.
Mm,
And I was invited on a podcast with a guy called Rangan Chatterjee, and he asked me. He straight up. He said, "What's the most important message you would give to someone?" I'd say hope. Now,
mhm,
hope is an interesting thing, because it's hope for what? We would never, ever presume a cure, because we just don't have it at the moment for any chronic pain problem. But
mhm.
hope for some kind of recovery, hope to make sense, hope for some controllability of pain, hope that you could have less pain and distress and could engage in things of value in your life and get stuff back that you've lost. That's
Yeah.
absolutely something that we know the majority of people can get back, even if you've had pain for many years. Now,
Mhm.
that's not said lightly, but it's what our research has shown. Now, that's not everybody's journey, but it's a lot of people's journey. And so, if you're someone who's kind of given up, and I suppose my question is, what kind of care have you had? Have you had someone
Mm,
who's really spent the time to listen to your story, kind of understand the pattern to your pain, explored, how your relationship with your body, how you use your body, reconnect you with your body, build your trust back in your body, because that's the journey that we take people through. And it
yeah.
can have an extraordinary effect for a number, not
Mhm,
everybody. We just don't have a panacea, but it brings
mhm,
hope to many who have given up at the moment. And so, I
mm,
say it with great humility, because, I'm not in the camp that's going to go, we've got the cure for back pain. We absolutely don't. But we do know that that therapeutic journey can be life changing for many people. And that's why
mm,
the Evolve Pain Care Academy website we've set up as a social enterprise. So it's to create a kind of resource for people living with pain. Go to that website and look for the resources for people with pain. and you'll see stories of people whose life journeys completely changed. You'll see information there around dispelling some of these unhelpful misconceptions. You'll see co-designed pathway of what the components or the changes and what had to happen in their journey for them to recover. So that's probably where I would speak to those people. And I've been so privileged, I think, to work in a job that I love to do, and I have so much hope, I think, that we could be doing something better and different. But we
Yeah.
need health systems to support it, because, the problem we've got at the moment is we have these short consultations that really don't give the patient or the clinician time to deeply understand what's happening and to take that
Mm.
journey. And that's a
Yeah.
huge barrier, I think, that we have as a profession. And a lot of healthcare is like really crammed into short consults that you don't even have time for a
Yeah.
conversation, let alone a partnership.
Mm. Oh, thank you so much for that message. I'll put the link in the show notes so people can check that out,
Yeah.
that
And
resource
then
out.
give us
And
feedback as well. Like we really value feedback. If there's stuff
mhm,
that's there that you're going, that's not helpful, or that's confusing, or that doesn't make
yeah,
sense, we really value it. So,
mhm,
we're constantly, it's about that growth mindset. We're constantly changing what we do, how we
yep,
do it, because
mhm,
we learn from the people who give us that. And we look at this as a partnership with people. Everything we've done is co-design with people who live with pain. So they get to
yep,
teach us, because their teaching of us is just as important as the
mhm.
partnership we have with them.
Yeah, awesome. Fantastic resource. I'll definitely put it in the show notes and people should go and check it out. Thank you so much for coming on the show and carving out a bit of time to speak with the listeners.
Yeah, it's
I'm sure it's going to be a valuable resource for them. So thank you so much.
yeah, cool. Lovely to chat.